Hello guys, close your eyes and imagine a candle's glow dancing on rough stone walls, long shadows cast across a quiet chapel floor. We are about to take a slow, gentle journey back in time. If you find comfort in these quiet journeys through the past, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. It's always so interesting to see how far and wide these quiet moments reach. Now, imagine yourself as a brother of the Knights Templar many centuries ago. It's the deep of night, just before dawn. The world is silent and dark, and you are kneeling on the cold flagstones of a small chapel. The air is chill. You can see your breath faintly in the dim light of a single oil lamp flickering beside the altar. Your eyes are closed, your head bowed low. Your scalp beneath your hood is shaven as a sign of humility, a circle of thin hair around a bare crown. Every brother has the same tonsured look, a reminder that you have set aside worldly fashion and vanity. Your face is rough with an untrimmed beard. The order forbids you to shave it, so it grows long and coarse. It's one of the few personal features left to you, since all of you wear the same simple robes. Feel the weight of that robe on your shoulders, a heavy woolen mantle that falls to your knees. It's plain and unadorned, a dull off-white in color. There are no decorations, no colorful linings or fancy buttons. On your left breast is sewn a single red cross, faded with time and washing. That red cross was added by command some years ago as the mark of your order, but otherwise your cloak is completely plain. Underneath, you have a rough wool tunic and hose. They itch against your skin, but you've grown used to the discomfort. Around your waist, you've tied a simple belt of woolen cord. There is no ornament on it, no fine buckle, just a knotted length of material to cinch your habit closed. Everything you wear is utilitarian. Your boots are plain, mud-stained leather with no spurs. You are not allowed to wear spurs indoors. In your hands, clasped together so tightly that your knuckles pale, you hold a small wooden rosary. The beads are smooth from your fingers, worrying them over countless prayers. You move your lips silently, reciting prayers in Latin under your breath. You do this from memory. Perhaps you never learned to read Latin, but you have memorized the Our Father and a handful of psalms. In the silence of the chapel, you and your brothers whisper Pater Noster, Quies in Caelus, over and over the soft susurration of Latin phrases, blending with the faint crackle of the lamp's flame. Not one of you speaks at full volume. You all maintain the rule: eat your bread in silence, pray in silence. Even in prayer, you must not disturb the brother kneeling next to you. Picture the rows of your fellow knights beside you on the hard floor. There are perhaps 20 of you here this night, though the chapel could fit many more. Each man is kneeling or prostrate, cloaked figures in the gloom. You can hear cloth rustling occasionally as someone shifts to ease a numb knee, or a quiet sniff as one brother fights the urge to cough. The rule forbids unnecessary noise in God's house, so you all stifle coughs and sneezes, trying not to break the sacred quiet. There are no benches or pews. You all stand or kneel directly on the stone. Your knees ache, pressed against the cold, unyielding floor, but you dare not shift too often lest it seem irreverent or distract the others. In the silence, every small motion feels amplified: the clink of a rosary bead falling from a brother's hand, the creak of leather as someone straightens his back. Above, in the rafters of the chapel's ceiling, a lonely draft whistles. The roof is wooden, with beams blackened from years of candle smoke. A few bats perhaps roost up there in the darkness. Occasionally you've seen them flutter out at dusk. Now they are still, and only the scent of melted beeswax and cold stone surrounds you. It's nearly dawn. You can just barely sense a graying of the night through the tiny slit windows high in the chapel wall. This is Matins, the first office of the day, and you have risen from your bed in the dead of night to chant these prayers. Your stomach is empty and hollow. Last night's meager supper has long since been digested, and you won't break fast for hours yet, but you ignore hunger. You clear your mind and focus on the words of the prayers, repeated so often they have become the rhythm of your life. As you kneel there, you recall the vows that bind you here: poverty, chastity, obedience, and implicitly silence and humility in all things. You gave up everything to become a poor fellow soldier of Christ. In your mind's eye, you see a fleeting memory, the day you took your vows. You were younger then, perhaps in your early 20s, standing before the altar in a similar chapel, in a linen shirt and woolen leggings, trembling slightly as you swore to follow the rule of the temple. The master or chaplain asked if you would truly give up all your worldly goods. You agreed, and all you owned, a few coins, maybe a horse if you were a knight of noble birth, was signed over to the order. From that day, nothing belonged to you individually, not even the clothes on your back. The white mantle you wear was given to you then, symbolizing purity and the new life you entered. You remember how scratchy and unfamiliar it felt, how the wool smelled of sheep's lanolin and wood smoke. It was not luxurious by any means. Some might call it shabby, but you wore it proudly, knowing that it marked you as one who had left the life of vanity and riches, you who had abandoned the life of darkness, as the rule says, and donned the armor of righteousness. Chastity. You vowed to remain celibate, to never know the touch of a woman. At that ceremony, you recall the stern warning given, to avoid women at all costs, for even the holiest men have been led astray by their embraces. The rule explicitly forbade you to kiss any woman, whether a widow, a maiden, even your own mother or sister. You remember the precise words read aloud, that the knights of Christ must not presume to kiss a woman, not even a mother or sister. When you heard that, you felt a pang, thinking of your mother back home. You had bid her farewell to join the order, and realized that if you ever saw her again, you could not even give her a dutiful kiss on the cheek. It was a hard thing, but you accepted it as the price of serving God. From then on, any time you might encounter a woman, which is rare since women are strictly kept away from Templar houses, you would lower your gaze and hurry past, as if even a glimpse could endanger your soul or stir temptations in your heart. And obedience, perhaps the hardest vow of all for a proud knight. You placed yourself utterly under command. The white mantle you wear marks you as a knight of Christ's temple, but it also means your will is no longer your own. You obey the rule and your superiors without question, as a soldier obeys orders. If your master or commander tells you to ride out in a storm at midnight on a dangerous errand, you will do it. If you are told to relinquish a personal comfort or perform a menial chore unbefitting a noble, you will do it. You have promised to observe unfailing obedience to the Grand Master and those above you. In battle, this obedience makes you fearless and disciplined. You will hold the line even unto death, because the rule says you must never retreat, so long as the banner still stands. But in daily life, too, obedience governs even the smallest actions: when to eat, when to sleep, when to speak. All of your days are scheduled and ordered by the bell and the rule. The chapel falls even more silent now, as the prayers of matins near their end. The last few murmured psalms echo softly. The appointed reader, an older chaplain with a gentle droning voice, reads a passage of scripture in Latin from memory. Servite Domino in timore. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. His voice is barely above a whisper, but in the stillness each syllable is clear. You listen, absorbing the holy words, letting them replace all personal thought. This is why you are here, you remind yourself, to serve God with fear and trembling, in absolute obedience. At last, the service is complete. The lamp is snuffed, and in the pre-dawn gloom, you and the brothers rise from your knees. Your joints protest as you stand. Your knees are stiff and tingling with pins and needles from kneeling so long. In the semi-dark, you can make out a few of your comrades stretching their legs quietly or rubbing at sore backs. A couple of the older knights move very slowly, one hand on a bench or a younger brother's shoulder to steady themselves as they stand. Long years of kneeling have worn out their knees. No words are exchanged. You maintain silence as you file out of the chapel. Each brother dips his fingers in the cold holy water stoup by the door and makes a sign of the cross. You do the same, feeling the chilly water on your forehead as you bless yourself. Outside the chapel, the sky is still dark, but the first faint band of deep blue is appearing on the horizon. It must be around 4 in the morning. The air outside is even colder than inside. You pull your mantle tighter around you. A few glimmering stars are still visible overhead. In the east, beyond the low silhouette of the preceptory's outer wall, you see the approach of dawn. It's utterly quiet. No birds yet, no cocks crow. Just the soft shuffling of feet as the Templars disperse to begin their day. Some brothers head back to the dormitory for a brief rest. The rule allows that after matins, since it's still quite early, you may return to bed for a short time until the next prayers at prime, around sunrise. But not everyone will sleep. You have chores to do, and perhaps you are one of the diligent ones who forego that extra wink of sleep to tend to duties. Or maybe you simply cannot easily fall back asleep after being up and active. Many of you find it easier to stay awake now until tonight. So instead of the dormitory, you turn towards the stables, where a few other knights are already headed. The ground of the courtyard is cold and a little damp with dew. In the faint pre-dawn light, you pick your way across the yard, boots crunching on gravel. You pass the low refectory building and the kitchen, which are dark and still. The scent of yesterday's wood smoke and boiled cabbage lingers faintly in the air near the kitchen. A cat slinks by the kitchen door, a gray shadow that darts away as soon as it sees your white cloak. You pause a moment, watching its green eyes shine in the dark. The commandery doesn't officially keep cats or dogs. It's against the custom to indulge in pets. Dogs especially are forbidden. Hunting hounds or even lapdogs are considered frivolous for men of religion. But barn cats at least come of their own accord, chasing the mice that nibble at stored grain. Still, you don't call to the cat or try to pet it. It wouldn't do for a Templar to be seen doting on an animal. Affection is reserved for God and brethren, not animals, another quiet denial of self. So you simply watch the creature slip away behind a stack of firewood and continue on your path. A familiar smell greets you as you near the stables, the warm, earthy scent of hay and horses, mixed with the pungent ammonia of old manure. The stable block is a long, low building adjoining the barn. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, you hear an eager whinny. One of the horses senses your approach, hoping for an early feed. Inside it's dim, only the gray dawn light filtering through cracks in the boards and a few tiny windows. But you know this place by heart. You walk down the central alley between stalls, patting a wooden post as you pass. Your hand comes away with a bit of splinter. The wood of the post is scarred by years of horses biting and kicking at it. You hear rustling and soft snorts. The horses are awake, some pawing the straw. One big mare tosses her head over the stall door, trying to catch your attention. You smile faintly, perhaps the first hint of a smile your face has shown in days, and step to her side. "Easy, girl," you whisper almost inaudibly. Speaking to animals is perhaps allowed, or at least not strictly forbidden as idle chatter among humans is. The mare's velvet nose bumps your palm, searching for a treat. You have none to give right now, only gentle strokes. By the faint light, you notice a sore on her withers. Yesterday the saddle must have rubbed. Immediately, training kicks in. You'll need to tend to that. But first, feeding. 2 other brothers have joined you in the stable, and together you begin the routine of the morning feed. This is work you do every day when in residence, regardless of rank. Even knights of noble birth handle shovels and feed sacks here. There's no hired groom. You are the caretakers of your own mounts as part of your duty. You haul a bale of hay from the stack at the end, cutting the twine with your dagger and portioning out flakes of dry hay into each manger. The horses bump and huff eagerly as you toss their breakfast in. Dust motes dance in the air as the hay is disturbed. You catch the sweet, dry scent of sun-cured grass. Next, you fetch the heavy sack of oats. It's about half full. You make a mental note that the supply is running low. Each horse gets a scoop of precious oats in their feed bucket. The grain thuds and rattles into wooden troughs, and the horses immediately set to crunching and munching. That sound, the contented crunch of horses eating, always brings you a small sense of satisfaction. No matter your own hardships, you at least can make these loyal beasts comfortable. This morning, as the animals eat, you check each one carefully. In the gloom, you run your hands along legs to feel for swelling. You pick up hooves to check for stones. You can't see well, so you rely on touch and experience. One of your horses lifts his hoof obediently. When you press his fetlock, you feel the smooth iron shoe and dig out a bit of packed dirt from the frog with your knife tip. Another horse pins his ears as you pass. He's a younger stallion with a temper. He snaps his teeth towards you. You dodge the attempt with practiced ease, but his yellow teeth clack loudly near your shoulder. "Hey, none of that," you mutter softly, pushing his head away. He tosses it, hoof stamping. One of your fellow knights chuckles under his breath at the sight. Yes, a quiet laugh escapes him before he covers his mouth. Technically, laughter is frowned upon in the order. The rule says to go about humbly without laughing or speaking too loudly. But here in the stable with only us, minor breaches might be forgiven. You grin back at him briefly, and it feels almost foreign to smile. How long has it been since you allowed yourself a laugh? The thought fades as quickly as it came. You resume checking the feisty stallion's stall latch to ensure it's secure. He has been known to try to escape if not bolted properly. The feeding and inspection done, you take a moment to simply be present among the animals. The dawn light is growing, enough that you can see dust floating in the air, the shapes of the horses shifting as they eat. A sparrow has flown in and perches on a rafter above, peeping softly. There's a peace here in the stables that you cherish, a subtle warmth from the bodies of the horses, the rhythmic sounds of them chewing. You lean against a stall door, feeling the sturdy wood under your hand, and breathe in the scents deeply, the sweet hay, the leather of saddles on their stands, the hint of saddle oil and horse sweat. It's a grounded, earthy smell. Sometimes you think you prefer it to the incense and wax of the chapel. Here, at least, things are straightforward. A horse is either hungry or fed, lame or sound. There's a simplicity to their needs that comforts you. But you can't linger too long, for another bell will ring soon. Prime, the next prayer hour, is near sunrise. You and the others quickly begin the next task, watering. With iron buckets in hand, you head to the courtyard well. The pulley squeals as you draw up fresh water, bucket by bucket, and carry them back to tip into the stone trough. It's heavy work. Cool water sloshes onto your boots and the ground as you heft the buckets. A few drops splash onto your face, and you wipe them off with your sleeve, the cold leaving a trail on your skin. Soon the trough is filled, and horses drink noisily, muzzles dunking and blowing bubbles. Now you shovel out any soiled straw from the stalls. The strong ammonia smell flares up as you pitch old bedding onto a barrow. You fork in some clean straw for the day. These daily chores keep you warm in the chilly morning, and by the time you finish, your muscles ache pleasantly, and a light sweat clings under your tunic. The others with you are similarly flushed from work, breath visible in little puffs. You've not exchanged many words, maybe the occasional low comment about a horse's condition or a simple "here" when passing a tool. Mostly, it's been a quiet, cooperative labor. In truth, you've become quite good at communicating with gestures or single words. Living under a rule of silence means you've developed a sort of unspoken understanding with your brothers. A nod, a pointed finger, a tilt of the head, these say as much as sentences. Monks of some orders use formal sign language. You Templars are not as codified, but informally, you also keep speech minimal during tasks. Stepping out of the stable, you see the sky now painted with pale pink and gold. The sun is cresting the horizon. A cock from the nearby village crows belatedly, and you can hear distant lowing of cows from some farm. The world outside the preceptory is waking up. Inside your compound, another day of prayer and duty begins. Sure enough, the chapel bell begins to toll, a clear ringing that summons everyone for prime. You quickly wipe your hands on a rag and hang the buckets on their peg. The horses are content and fed, water trough full, they'll be fine until later. You whisper a quick fond word to your favorite mare and then hurry out, your boots leaving prints in the damp earth. Gathering in the chapel once more, now with early sunlight glowing through the high windows, you and the brethren stand for the prime office. This time you are less drowsy and more alert, having done some work. Prime is a shorter prayer, a few psalms, a hymn, and a reading. You all stand in your places, hoods up, hands folded. The sunlight slants in, illuminating the motes of dust and the outlines of your forms. You feel a trickle of sweat from the stable work cooling on your back under your shirt as you stand still in the drafty chapel. A shiver runs through you, but you maintain focus. The day has officially begun. After prime, the daily routine truly kicks in. The commander of the house, a stern man with gray in his beard, clears his throat and quietly assigns tasks for the morning. This happens in a brief gathering called chapter, often held after prime on certain days. You all remain standing in the choir stalls as he gives instructions. There is no chatting or debate. He speaks, you bow or nod. Today, for instance, he might say, "Brother Amon, you and Brother Bernard will ride to the north field to check the tenant's progress on the harvest." Two of the sergeants bow and accept the errand. Brother Jeffrey, inventory the grain in the barn and report back by midday. Another nod. Brother Lucas, there are letters to be written. Meet me in the archive after terce. You lower your eyes as he addresses you. Yes, that's you, perhaps being tasked with correspondence or copying records. You acknowledge with a quiet "Yes, Commander," or just a nod. Others might be assigned to mend weapons, or clean the chapel, or accompany a local traveler to the next commandery. Everyone has something to do. Idleness is the enemy of the soul. The rule reminds you, so they keep you busy when not at prayer. Sometimes this chapter meeting also addresses any breaches of discipline. If any brother has committed a fault, he is expected to confess it openly here to the assembly. On this morning, one young sergeant steps forward with his head bowed. In a trembling voice, he admits, "My brothers, I have spoken out of anger to Brother Hugh yesterday and struck him on the arm. A minor scuffle happened presumably." The commander purses his lips. Fighting among brethren is taken seriously, but because the offender confessed voluntarily, the punishment will be lighter. The commander instructs him, "For penance you will eat on the floor of the refectory for the next 3 meals, and refrain from drinking wine this week." The young man murmurs, "Yes, Commander, thank you," and steps back in line, cheeks flushed with shame. Eat on the floor, that is a common punishment, meaning the brother cannot sit at the table, but must take his meals sitting on the ground like a penitent, often in the infirmary or kitchen, rather than with the others. It's humiliating, but not severe. In worse cases, if a brother denies a charge or others accuse him, a more formal inquiry might happen, but today it seems all faults are minor. Another brother is called out for neglecting to care for his sword properly. It was found rusted. He will have to do extra cleaning duties and miss one meal. Another failed to show proper reverence in chapel. Maybe he was caught dozing during prayer, and he is assigned to stand during meal readings as a reminder to all. Such small corrections are routine. You feel relief that today you yourself have no infraction to confess. Had you, it would be better to speak up now and accept penance rather than hide it, for if someone else reported you later, the consequences could be worse. Honesty and humility are drummed into you. Better to accuse yourself of your failings than to be accused by others. With assignments given and penances allotted, the morning's chapter disperses. By now the sun has truly risen, casting a clean light over the modest compound of your commandery. Let's take a slow walk through this place you call home. Envision the layout. It is not a grand castle or fortress like some might imagine the Templars inhabit. This is a fairly small preceptory in a temperate land, perhaps in rural France or Spain, or maybe in England's countryside. It resembles a small monastery more than a castle. There is a sturdy stone wall around the perimeter, yes, but that is as much to keep thieves out and livestock in as to defend against any serious attack. Within the walls are a cluster of stone buildings with steep, simple roofs of clay tile or wooden shingles. There's the chapel, which we have seen, a plain but devout space. Attached to it or nearby is the dormitory where you sleep. Then the refectory hall for meals, a kitchen building with pantries and cellars beneath, and across the yard, the stable and barn and smithy. Perhaps there's also a workshop or armory, and at the center of it all, a small courtyard or well. Off to one side might be a garden or orchard for vegetables and medicinal herbs. It's a self-sufficient little complex designed to support the brothers living here and to store supplies for when provisions are sent to the Holy Land or to other houses. The architecture is plain and solid. These buildings were often gifts from local lords or built by the brothers themselves. The stones are gray and rough-hewn. Only the chapel has any bit of ornament, perhaps a simple cross carved above the door and a narrow stained glass window behind the altar, likely just geometric colored panes, nothing fancy. Everywhere else, function rules. The dormitory, for example, is a long rectangular room on the second floor of one wing. Let's walk there. You climb a set of creaking wooden stairs and enter the dormitory. Sunlight streams through a few small windows along one wall. Lining the walls are straw-filled mattresses on low wooden frames, or just pallets raised slightly off the floor. Each one is identical, separated by maybe an arm's length of space. There are no curtains, no partitions, communal living in the strictest sense. Each brother's sleeping place has a blanket or two, perhaps a single thin pillow or folded cloak serving as pillow. Personal belongings are almost non-existent here. You might see at most a pair of boots set by a bed or a wooden trunk at the foot of one or two beds containing a brother's spare habit, and maybe some small personal token like a rosary, a prayer book if literate, or perhaps a letter from family, though letters are rare since you have little contact with home now. Even those trunks are plain, unadorned, and usually kept locked by the commander or draper, the officer in charge of clothing and linens. During the night, the dormitory is faintly lit. The rule requires a lamp remain burning, so there is no total darkness, both for safety and to discourage any improper behavior under cover of dark. Even now by day, you can smell the remnants of last night's tallow candles, a slightly acrid, fatty odor clinging to the air. The windows are narrow and usually kept shuttered or just ajar, so the room often smells of stale air, sweat, and oil from the lamp. You notice dust on the floorboards catching the sunlight, Cleaning is a constant chore, but it never really vanishes. The dust. A broom rests in the corner. One of the sergeants will sweep the dorm later in the day as assigned. In one corner, near a window, you see a small stand with a basin and a few pottery jugs, the washing area. There's no luxury of a bath here. Brothers wash face and hands in the mornings with cold water and maybe rinse their feet at night. Baths are infrequent and might involve hauling water to tubs, so they're often reserved for the sick or on rare occasions. Everyone is a bit grubby by modern standards. The smell of unwashed bodies is ordinary. You all wear your shirts and breeches to bed. Indeed, the rule says to sleep in shirt, breeches, shoes, and belt, to always be ready and decent. So at night, the dormitory is filled with men sleeping fully clothed or nearly so, which keeps you modest but also sweaty in summer and somewhat warmer in winter. Each morning, you might change your undertunic if you have a spare, or maybe not. Laundry day is occasional. If you have only 1 or 2 sets of clothing, you cannot wash them daily. The draper doles out clean linen shirts maybe once a week or as needed, especially in hot climates. From Easter to All Saints summer, the rule mercifully allows a change to a lighter linen shirt for the heat, but now perhaps it is cooler weather and you wear heavier wool. As you move through the dormitory, you recall nights spent here. Imagine it, a long row of brothers lying on pallets, their forms barely discernible under blankets in the low lamplight, the sounds of soft snoring or shifting, sometimes a man talking quietly in his sleep or whispering a late-night prayer. You, lying on your back, staring at the dark rafters above, perhaps wrestling with your thoughts while around you dozens of others dream. Privacy does not exist here. Even your dreams sometimes betray you aloud, and a brother next to you might nudge you awake if you start muttering something unseemly. And if you cannot sleep and feel the need to pace or get fresh air, you must ask permission, at least inform the brother on duty. There is always someone subtly keeping watch, even at night, to ensure order. Indeed, often 1 or 2 brothers are assigned to stay awake in shifts, especially if there are valuable goods stored or for general security. They might pray quietly or patrol the compound under the moonlight while others sleep. You've done it yourself, walking the dark corridors at midnight, listening to the snores of your comrades, the silence of the halls broken only by the scuff of your own feet, and maybe the squeak of a mouse. It's a lonely vigil, but an oddly contemplative time. You felt like a ghost among living men, gliding past the rows of sleeping nights with only your thoughts for company. Those nights you often prayed extra, asking God to keep your mind from wandering into temptation, because weariness and solitude can invite dark thoughts. Looking at one empty bed now, you recall a specific incident one night not long ago. One of the younger brothers had woken up crying out softly. He'd had a bad dream, or rather, a sinful dream. You remember he came to you in distress the next morning, confessing in whispers that he'd experienced a nocturnal pollution, an involuntary emission in the night. He was mortified and scared that it was a sin on his soul. Officially, the rule doesn't expel someone for what happens unconsciously, but it encourages immediate confession of any such occurrences, as they could be signs of the devil's temptations or impure thoughts creeping in. You comforted him and advised him to speak to the chaplain. He did, and he was given some small penance, extra prayers of contrition, and encouraged to fast for a day to purify himself. Still, you saw how the poor lad was racked with guilt for days, constantly examining his thoughts, fearing he had let lust enter his heart somehow. This is the inner struggle you all face. Even when the body is restrained by vows, the mind and the flesh find their ways to trouble the conscience. In the communal dormitory, there are no secrets. Even one's shame tends to become known, and thus you all learn humility. There is no room for pride when your most private humiliations are witnessed or easily discovered by your brothers. Leaving the dormitory, you step back into the open air of the yard. The sun is climbing, burning off the last of the dawn mist. The bell for Terci, the third-hour prayer around mid-morning, hasn't rung yet, so you have a little time to attend to assigned duties. You recall that the commander mentioned letters needed writing. Perhaps he wants you to draft a report to the Grand Commander in Paris, or respond to a query from a local lord. You head toward the scriptorium, or archive. In a modest preceptory like this, it might just be a small room adjacent to the chapel, where books and documents are kept in an armoire or chest. You enter a cool room with one arched window letting in light. Dusty shelves line one wall, holding a few rolled charters, some ledgers, and several precious books, likely a Bible, a psalter, maybe copies of the Order's Rule in Latin and French, and some account books of the house. These books are kept secured. One has a simple chain attaching it to the shelf, a deterrent to any who might remove it without permission. Books are rare valuables. A writing desk stands by the window. On it are quills, a penknife, an inkwell, and some sheets of parchment. There's also some parchment stretching frames and pumice for smoothing, signs that someone has been preparing new sheets for writing. One of the sergeant brothers, who is literate, perhaps serves as a clerk here. Indeed, a middle-aged brother named Raymond is already there, hunched over an account roll, tallying something with a quill. He glances up as you enter and gives a polite nod. "Brother," he greets quietly. You nod in return. Speaking quietly is acceptable in such work contexts, as long as it's about necessary business. On the desk you see a ledger of supplies open to a page filled with rows of careful script. You peek. It looks like last month's inventory of grain and wine. Entries noting how many bushels of barley were harvested, or how many casks of wine remain in the cellar. Tiny notes in the margin record losses, 2 sacks lost to rot, or 5 gallons vinegar made from spoiled wine. It's tedious but vital information, and someone must record it to manage the estate properly. Perhaps today, your job is to update these records with current counts. Sure enough, Brother Raymond slides over a wax tablet showing scribbled interim notes. Grain in silo, 30 bushels wheat, 12 bushels barley, old, 0 oats. Shortage, awaiting next delivery. You note the oats are at 0. No wonder the horses had only a small portion this morning. You'll need to address that shortage. Another line. Hay bales remaining, 10 a staff, enough for maybe 1 month more. More lines. Candles remaining, 24 tallow, 6 beeswax for chapel, and firewood low. This little list goes on, mentioning cloth for new mantles, nails and ironwork needed for repairs, etc. Looking at it, you feel a weight of mundane responsibility. These dry numbers are part of your sacred mission too, though it hardly feels glorious. You think back to when you first became a Templar. You imagined fierce battles, heroic stands for God. Yet here you are, worrying about oats and candles and nails. It's oddly anticlimactic. But you remind yourself someone must ensure the brothers are fed, and the order's wealth is properly stewarded for God's work. If you squander or mismanage it, pilgrims might starve on the road, or knights at the front might lack horses. So this too is a holy task in its own dull way. You pick up a quill, sharpen it slightly with the penknife, and dip in the ink. With careful strokes, you update the ledger from the wax notes. You write in Latin abbreviations, as is common. Hordeum modia 12 remenent, 12 bushels of barley remain. Avena nulla, no oats. Candeli tof toint sebum, seek Sarah, etc. The quill scratches softly over the parchment. A drop of ink blobs unexpectedly. You mutter under your breath and blot it quickly. The parchment here is reused often, scraped clean if needed, palimpsest because materials are costly. So every entry you strive to be neat and not waste space. Brother Raymond is now melting some red wax to seal a roll of documents. He He has a small bronze seal of the order to stamp them. You notice that seal. It depicts two knights riding on one horse, the old symbol of the Templars' poverty in the early days. Supposedly it showed how the first knights were so poor that two had to share a single horse. Looking at that emblem always gives you a strange feeling. Perhaps it was true once, but nowadays you often have more horses than men at a site like this. You even saw that symbol stamped on a letter demanding repayment of a loan from a king. Ironic, given how wealthy the order became. The world thinks the Templars are rich, yet individually you still live austerely. Two knights on one horse. The world imagines it as humility, or sometimes mocks it as greed disguised. Either way, you recall it now as a reminder. We call ourselves pauperesque militones, Christi T, poor fellow soldiers of Christ. But with lands and treasures in our coffers, many doubt that claim of poverty. The common folk certainly do. This thought crosses your mind fleetingly as you sign the ledger with a simple cross mark. One day, might our wealth be our undoing? You wonder silently, then push the thought away. It's not your place to question, only to obey and keep accounts honestly. After writing, you sand the ink to dry it, then close the ledger. Your fingers are slightly stained with ink, and your back a bit stiff from leaning over. It's nearly time for terce, the third-hour prayers, around 9 a.m. Brother Raymond rolls his shoulders and sighs, then starts gathering up some finished letters to send with the brothers riding out today. One letter is addressed to the master of another preceptory regarding a land boundary dispute. Another seems to be an inventory report for the treasurer in Paris. They deal with such mundane issues, noting that a certain preceptory's cellar is empty of wine, asking for funds to purchase more, or complaining that a pair of mules loaned to a local abbot have not been returned. Yes, one missive mentions missing mules. You can't help but shake your head slightly at how petty some issues are. One commander writing another about two stubborn mules. Another page on the table lists items needed for next season: 5 new woolen cloaks, 3 helmets, current ones badly dented, 40 horseshoes, 2 large cooking pots, 1 kettle cracked, a dozen spoons, several lost or broken. Among them, humorously, is 1 ladle. Apparently one of the kitchen's ladles went missing, and it's been noted formally as an item to replace. You imagine how it disappeared. Perhaps a careless brother left it in a pot that went out to feed laborers, and it never came back. Such a small thing, yet it's recorded and will be resolved by command, as if as important as a sword or horse. This is how thorough, and some might say tedious, the administration is. Nothing is too small to account for. From mules to ladles, everything given to the order is ultimately God's property, so losing or breaking it is taken seriously. It must be reported, replacements arranged, culprits perhaps mildly scolded for carelessness. The bell tolls again. Terse, you and Brother Raymond set aside the paperwork and hurry again to the chapel. By now the sun is bright and spilling color into the chapel through that little stained glass window. This time, many of you stand rather than kneel, as it's a short office. Perhaps you all chant a hymn softly together, one of the few times you actually use your voices in unison. The melody is a simple plain chant, and you keep it low and gentle so it doesn't echo too harshly. The Latin words praising the Holy Spirit roll off your tongue, memorized long ago. For a moment as you sing, you feel a hint of contentment. These moments of communal prayer are why you joined, to be united with fellow warriors of Christ in praise. Your voice merges with theirs in the stone chamber, and the sound is soothing, resonant. The acoustics cause the chant to linger like a soft halo of sound around you all. You see a few brothers with eyes closed, singing with serene expressions, momentarily lost in devotion. After tercy, the morning work continues. Some brothers have left the commandery on assigned tasks, riding out to oversee properties or deliver messages. Others remain. You, after finishing the writing task, might now turn to another duty. Perhaps it's time to inspect your weapons and armor, as the rule expects each knight to do regularly. So you head to the armory or storage room where arms are kept. This armory is a small chamber with stone walls that always feel cool and dry. There are racks and pegs on the walls where mail hauberks hang like ghostly silhouettes, and helmets rest on wooden shelves. Spears and lances lean in one corner, their tips glinting. A large wooden chest reinforced with iron bands contains bows, bowstrings, and bundles of arrows kept safe from dampness. Another chest holds swords and maces wrapped in oiled cloth. On a table lies a jumble of harness straps, bits, and spurs, awaiting repair or cleaning. You take down your own chainmail shirt from its peg. It's extremely heavy, about 50 pounds of interlinked iron rings, but you've grown accustomed to it. Holding it up, you inspect it, link by link, for rust. Inevitably, some reddish bloom of rust is appearing in spots where blood or sweat wasn't fully cleaned off last use. You carry it to a bench, take a small pot of fine sand and oil, and begin the laborious process of mail cleaning. Sitting there, you spread the mail on your lap and rub handfuls of sand into it, shaking and grinding gently. The friction scrubs the rust away gradually. It's a monotonous chore, perfect for contemplation. As you swirl the sand through the rings, making a soft scraping hiss, you recall times you wore this mail in battle or patrol. Perhaps there's a rent in it that had to be mended after you took a spear thrust at the last skirmish. Yes, near the shoulder you find where new rings were added, the metal bright and shiny compared to the dark gray of older rings. You run your finger over that spot, remembering the sharp pain that day and how Brother Medicus in the commandery had cleaned the wound with vinegar and bound your arm, while another brother quietly repaired the mail soon after, so you could fight again. Now the wound is just a dull ache on rainy days, and the mail is whole once more. Your life too feels like this patched mail sometimes, full of hurts and repairs, scars and mends, held together by duty and God's grace. These thoughts drift by idly as you work the sand over the rings. After a time, you lift the mail and shake it out. A cascade of fine reddish sand falls to the floor, taking rust with it. You run an oiled rag over the metal now, wiping away residues. The mail glistens slightly with the thin coat of oil that will protect it from moisture. Satisfied, you carefully fold or roll the hauberk and hang it back up. Next, you check your sword. It hangs in its scabbard on a peg. You draw it out. The blade catches the light. It's straight and nicked from use, but well kept. You feel along the edges for burrs that need filing. The hilt is plain steel and leather, no jewels, no engravings. Personal heraldry is not displayed. You fight under the Bosillont, the black and white banner of the order, and the cross of the temple, not your family arms. In fact, if your sword once bore your noble family crest, you likely had to remove it or cover it. Some brothers even have second-hand weapons from older knights. Nothing belongs to you alone, and one man's sword may later become another's. Thus it remains impersonal. As you polish the blade with a rag lightly oiled, you think of how rarely you have actually had to swing it in true combat. Despite years of service, pitched battles are few. Far more often, your sword stays sheathed while you escort pilgrims or guard a castle, but it must be ever ready, just as you must be spiritually ever ready. Slackness could be fatal in battle, as sin could be in the soul. After the sword, you inspect your helmet, a pot helm with a nasal guard perhaps, or by later years, a great helm that encases the head. It smells of iron and dried sweat inside. A faint odor of old leather from the padded liner reaches your nose as you lift it. There's a rust spot near the rim. You take a bit of wool pad and buff it off with oil. It's heavy and dented on one side, where a mace glanced off once. You recall the ringing sound that blow made in your ears, how your vision had flashed white, but you stayed on your horse and kept formation that day. The dent remains as a testament to that close call. You consider asking the smith to hammer it out later. There is a blacksmith's forge by the barn, a simple anvil and bellows set up, primarily to shoe horses and fix tools. The resident smith is not a Templar brother, but a hired lay craftsman, since someone with full training is needed for quality forging. He comes twice a week or as needed. Perhaps next time he's here, you'll have him even out this dent. On a shelf, you see several wooden crates marked with charcoal tally marks. These hold spare pieces of armor and arrowheads. One crate has 13 marked on it, indicating 13 sword blades, likely broken or corroded spares, waiting to be reforged or sold as scrap. Another has XX marking a bundle of 20 spearheads. Inventory like this is always counted and recounted. You remember helping count arrows once, bundling them in dozens and writing down how many flights of arrows were in stock after a delivery from a nearby Fletcher. Even each horseshoe nail must be accounted for, nothing wasted. The level of detail can be wearisome, but it keeps the logistics of war and travel running. Quiet logistics, unseen by those who only hear of battles. After an hour or so in the armory cleaning and checking gear, terse is done and some brothers come to get you for the next task. Today, as it turns out, a group of pilgrims traveling to Santiago de Compostela will be passing by and has requested an escort for a particularly bandit-prone stretch of road north of here. Even though you are a military order originally sworn to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land, you often also help pilgrims in your region as part of charity and service. The commander has decided to send a small contingent, likely 2 knights and a couple of sergeants on horseback, to accompany these travelers through the woods up to a safer point. You have been assigned as one of those knights. There is a bit of preparation to do. You must don your armor, saddle your horse, and be ready to depart by late morning, so you change out of your work tunic and into your riding gear. Over your padded gambeson, a thick quilted jacket, you pull on the chainmail hauberk you just cleaned. The weight settles on your shoulders. You tie the leather points that hold it securely. You strap on knee guards and leather riding boots. Over the mail goes your white surcoat, again plain except a red cross on the chest. It will get dusty and stained on the road, but it identifies you clearly. Your sword belt is tightened around your waist, and you place your sword in its scabbard there, alongside a dagger. A cross pendant worn under your tunic rests against your chest, a small personal devotional token given when you joined. You never remove it, a reminder of whom you serve. Finally, you set your helmet near at hand, though you won't put it on until needed, preferring to travel with the open hood of your mail coif for visibility and comfort. In the stable, your horse is being prepared. He's a strong bay destrier, tall and with a spirited eye, one of 3 horses allotted to you by the rule. Each knight is allowed up to 3 horses, given the need for remounts. A sergeant helps you tack him up, a high-cantled war saddle, plain but sturdy, padded with a woolen blanket. You check the girth strap twice. You've learned never to trust a single tightening. A loose saddle could be deadly. The horse stamps, sensing impending work. You stroke his neck to calm him. By late morning, the little caravan sets out. Picture this scene on the road. The sun is now bright and high, warming the earth. You and 3 other mounted brothers trot at a steady pace down a dusty road, flanked by forest. Ahead of you, about a dozen pilgrims trudge on foot or ride small donkeys. They are ordinary folk mostly, a few townsmen, maybe a noble woman with her servants, and some peasants, all bound to see the shrine of St. James. They wear wide-brimmed hats and carry walking sticks decorated with scallop shells, the badge of Compostela pilgrims. They look weary, faces lined with sweat and dust, but determined. Your presence both reassures and intimidates them. You notice how they glance nervously at you, a warrior monk in full mail and cloak, a silent sentinel. Some keep a respectful distance, unsure if they may speak to you. Others whisper among themselves, likely about how imposing the Templars look. Perhaps one brave soul, a young boy running alongside his parents, looks up at you curiously and offers a shy smile. You allow yourself to smile gently back, but you remain mostly formal. As you ride, you maintain silence, as is your custom. Your companion knights also are quiet, scanning the trees for any sign of ambush. This particular woodland is known for brigands. The only sounds are the creaking of the wooden cartwheels. One pilgrim group has a handcart that squeals as it rolls, the clop of hooves on the dirt road, and occasional birdsong from the canopy above. The pilgrims murmur among themselves now and then, but even they seem to adopt a hushed tone in your stern company. Hour after hour you proceed. The road winds through dense forest, alternating between patches of sunlight and shade. The summer heat rises, and in your mail and padded gambeson you begin to swelter. Sweat trickles down your temples and soaks into the padding under your arms. It's not unbearable while you move. The motion of the horse creates a slight breeze, but whenever you halt, the heat clings to you. You envy the pilgrims in their lighter clothes, though they too suffer, trudging on aching feet with the sun beating down on their broad hats. At midday, you pause for a short rest by a stream. The pilgrims gratefully lower their packs and drink from the clear water. You and your fellow knights see to the horses first. It's rule and tradition that the horses are watered and fed before the men take any refreshment. So you lead your horse to the stream's edge. He thrusts his muzzle in and slurps noisily, drinking his fill. You check his flanks. He's sweating and breathing a bit heavy from the long trot. You loosen his girth to let him breathe easier while resting. Another brother produces a small feed bag of grain, barley mash, which you share between the mounts so they can have some nourishment. Only once the animals are seen to do, you take a moment to rest yourself. You remove your helmet and coif, shaking out your sweat-damp hair, cropped short, of course. The air on your face is a relief. You have a water skin attached to your saddle. You unhook it and take a modest sip of water mixed with a little vinegar, a common drink you carry. The vinegar cuts the foul taste of possibly stagnant water and keeps it safer. It's sour and warm, but it quenches your parched throat somewhat. You do not gorge on water. Discipline is constant, and there's only so much to go around. One of the pilgrims, an older man, approaches timidly with a loaf of coarse black bread and some dried figs in his hand. "Good brother knight," he says softly, holding them out. "Please take and eat. It's not much, but a thanks for your protection." For a moment you wrestle with yourself. The rule forbids accepting gifts of food for personal indulgence. You're supposed to eat only what is provided from your own stores, to avoid greed or favoritism. However, refusing a kind offering from a pilgrim might seem rude and disappoint him. You solve it by gently taking a fig, just one, and thanking him quietly, then encouraging him to keep the rest for his journey. "Your need is greater than mine," you say. He insists once more, but you remain politely firm. In the end, he nods, still grateful for you at least accepting the fig. You chew it slowly as you stand beneath a tree, savoring the little burst of sweetness and energy it gives. Fresh fruit of any kind is a rarity in your diet, a small blessing from this encounter. All too soon, the break is over. You and the other knights tighten girths, remount with a bit of clanking and effort, since mounting in mail armor is no easy task, and signal the pilgrims to continue. As you ride on, the afternoon grows hotter. Dust kicked up by the horses, and the cart clings to your sweaty face and neck. Flies buzz around you, drawn by the smell of horse and man. You occasionally swat at them, but mostly endure the nuisance. Inside your male coif, you feel itchy as sweat trickles, and there's probably a louse or two that has found its way into the padding. Such companions are inevitable on long journeys and in communal living. You'll have to delouse your garments later perhaps, a tedious task of picking them out or boiling the clothes. But right now, you just scratch at an itch under your chin and carry on. The bandit attack, when it comes, is quick and chaotic, ironically breaking the monotony for a brief moment of danger. In the late afternoon, as the road passes through a particularly dense thicket, a few ragged figures rush out with clubs and a rusty sword. They likely thought the pilgrims would be easy prey, but seeing armed knights, they hesitate. One foolish bandit still lunges and grabs a pack from a pilgrim's back, and another tries to scare the group by waving his sword. Your reaction is drilled into you. You shout a sharp command, "Stay behind us," to the pilgrims, breaking your silence because now necessity dictates it. With a swift kick of your heels, you urge your horse forward. The great beast charges a few steps, and the mere sight of a mailed knight on a war horse bearing down is usually enough to scatter ill-armed robbers. Indeed, two of the bandits turn and flee instantly into the brush. The one with the pack drops it to lighten his sprint as he vanishes among the trees. The leader with the rusty sword stands stunned for a half-second too long. Your fellow knight swings his horse around and knocks the man down with the flat of his blade in a single blow. The bandit tumbles and scrambles away limping, disappearing after his fellows. Just like that, it's over. The forest is silent again, save for the excited murmurs of the pilgrims and the snorting of your horses. The pilgrims shower you with thanks, some even tearful, believing you saved them from a terrible fate. In truth, it was a minor scuffle, hardly worth calling a fight. No blood was even shed this time, thankfully. You dismount to retrieve the dropped pack and return it to a grateful young woman who keeps repeating "Gracias, Señor," "Dios os bendiga," if in Spain, or in French, "Merci, Monsieur, que Dieu vous garde." You simply bow your head, acknowledging, but inside you feel something conflicted. Part of you is content that you fulfilled your duty protecting the weak. This is exactly what you joined for. But another part notes the ease with which the robbers ran. Not a glorious battle, no chance for heroics or martyrdom. Most of your missions end like this: a deterrence, a guard duty, not an epic clash of armies. A quiet, unsung success. No chronicler will ever write of the day Brother Lucas scared off 3 thieves, after all. But these people will remember, at least for a time. Perhaps that is enough. Evening comes, and your escort task is over once you lead the pilgrims to a larger road where the local lord's guards patrol. They thank you profusely one more time, and then you bid them farewell, turning your horses to head back home. It's just you and the other Templar knights now on the return journey, which you make in good time with fewer stops. Still, night falls before you reach the preceptory. You find yourselves riding under a clear sky, spattered with stars, the road scarcely visible under your horse's cautious steps. You do not sing or carouse to pass the time. That would be against your rule. Secular soldiers on the march might sing ribald songs or play dice by the campfire, but you travel like monks, quietly, perhaps humming a psalm or simply listening to the night noises. An owl hoots in the distance, crickets chirp in the hedges, the rhythmic clop of your horse is your companion. In the darkness, your mind wanders. Fatigue opens the gates to wandering thoughts. You recall home, perhaps the village or castle where you were born. It feels like a lifetime ago. You haven't seen your family in years, maybe since you took the mantle. Letters from home are few or non-existent. You had to detach from that life. You wonder, is your mother still alive? Did your younger sister marry? You may never know. It tugs at your heart briefly, the loneliness of being a Templar, cut off from the normal joys of family and friendship outside the order. You have your brothers in arms, yes, but camaraderie is tempered by hierarchy and constant regulation. It's not the same as a family by blood. In many ways, you are all orphans bound together by a purpose. You push those thoughts away by reciting a prayer softly to yourself as your horse plods on. In Tate, Domine speravi. In you, Lord, I have placed my hope. You let the familiar words fill the emptiness of longing with a sense of higher calling. You remind yourself that this sacrifice of personal life is for God, that every pang of loneliness can be offered to Christ, who also was lonely and forsaken in the garden. This is your comfort in the long, dark rides of life, to unite your small sufferings with His. By the time you reach the commandery gate, it's late, perhaps compline. The last prayer of the day has already been said by those at home. A sleepy sergeant opens the gate for you with a lantern. You wearily stable your horses, again tending them even now before you rest, taking off their tack, rubbing them down with straw wads to dry sweat, giving them a handful of hay. It's near midnight by the time you drag your exhausted body into the chapel for a brief personal prayer of thanks, and then to the dormitory. Most others are asleep, though a couple stir as you enter, clanking a bit. You remove your armor as quietly as possible, not an easy task, as mail rings jingle and a dropped buckle on the floor rings out like a bell. You mutter an apology to the darkness. Someone grumbles softly and rolls over. Finally, down to your sweat-damp undershirt and breeches, you collapse onto your hard mattress. Your whole body throbs, shoulders bruised from the mail weight, thighs sore from hours in the saddle, a blister on your foot rubbed raw by your boot, and new mosquito bites itching on your neck. It's a misery to many, but to you, it's just another day in the life of a warrior monk. You accept these aches as penance and drift into a heavy, dreamless sleep almost immediately. Days blend into days, and weeks into weeks. Many days are not as eventful as that escort. Some are downright monotonous. Picture a string of days at the commandery with no travel, rising at dawn, prayers, cleaning, training drills in the yard. Yes, you do train. Perhaps every other day you practice swordplay or lance couching with your brothers, though under strict rules, no excessive rivalry, and certainly no tournaments or jousting for sport, like secular knights. That is forbidden. Your practice is sober and controlled. Then labor, harvesting in the fields alongside hired peasants, or repairing roofs or copying texts. Each day framed by the cycle of prayers, matins, prime, terce, sext, nones, vespers, compline, a rhythm that becomes ingrained such that time almost loses meaning beyond those points. The seasons pass too, each with its particular discomforts and challenges. In winter, the chapel is frigid, your breath visible as you sing morning psalms. The dormitory is cold, and the single fireplace in the refectory struggles to warm the hall. You often keep your cloak wrapped even indoors. At night, 2 or 3 brothers might quietly slip extra straw under their mattresses or cuddle their own arms for warmth, since asking for additional blankets is frowned upon unless one is truly ill. On bitter nights, you feel the pain in old wounds. An arrow scar on your thigh throbs, and an ache settles in your back, but you grit your teeth and bear it as a test of endurance. When snow falls, you and the others must shovel it out of the yard, clear the roofs, break ice for water for the animals. Your fingers go numb and chilblains form from working in the wet cold without proper gloves. Sometimes you use rough wool mittens, but often it's just your calloused hands. Frostbite is a real risk if you're out too long. One brother lost the tip of his nose last year to a freezing night watch. You recall seeing him come in from guarding the outer gate on a January dawn, his face white as chalk, the skin at the tip of his nose and ears dead-looking. The infirmary rubbed snow on it and then warm water, but the nose tip turned black and eventually had to be sloughed off. He laughs about it now in summer, calling himself Brother No Nose, but at the time it was painful and dangerous. In spring, rains turn the roads to mud. You often are drenched while working or riding. The cloaks help, but only so much. Inevitably, water finds its way through seams. You know the discomfort of wearing damp wool all day, the smell of wet sheep, the chafing on your neck. Sometimes your feet never quite dry out for days, wrinkling and pale, and you risk sores. The rainy season also means the roof leaks, a drop, drop, drop in the dormitory onto someone's pillow in the night. The unfortunate brother moves his bedding to avoid the drip, and next day you all might be patching the roof with tar and cloth in the rain. Everything feels clammy, yet there's a freshness too. The herb garden springs to life, and the scent of thyme and sage after rain wafts through. You all welcome the first fresh greens on the table after a long winter of salted foods. Still, with spring also comes disease sometimes, aches and fevers that thrive in the damp. With no real medicine, a severe fever is life-threatening. The infirmary may fill with coughing, shivering men. The infirmary gives what remedies he can, a cup of vinegar boiled with sage as a tonic, or wine mixed with tree sap, or simply prayers and a touch of a holy relic, perhaps a fragment of a saint's bone encased in a little reliquary, pressed to the patient's chest. Some recover, others do not. When a brother dies, it's a quiet affair, no grand tombs or effigies. He's buried in the little graveyard behind the chapel with a simple wooden cross marker. No name if he was a lowly sergeant or brother, just another soldier of Christ returned to the earth. You all sing the Requiem Mass. Then within a day his possessions are redistributed, his habit washed and given to another or to a poor man, his sword passed to someone who needs one, etc. Life moves on. In some ways, death is disturbingly ordinary here. Perhaps that's why you strive to keep your soul prepared. You see how one day a man is next to you at dinner, and by the next week he's in the ground, and his bunk has a new occupant. You reflect sometimes, will they remember me when I'm gone? Or will I too just be a brief mention in the mortality roll, a cross planted and then forgotten? Such thoughts you try to transform into fervor in prayer, hoping God at least sees and remembers. Summer brings its own trials. If you are stationed in a hot climate, say in Outremer, the Holy Land, or in Iberia, summer is brutal. Under a blazing sun, wearing armor or even the heavy robes is almost unbearable. The rule allowed linen shirts precisely for this reason. You soak through your clothes with sweat. You often march or ride in a heat haze, mouth dry as chalk. There's not always enough water. Discipline means you don't gulp all at once. You ration. Sunburn blisters your face and neck where it's exposed. Many Templars wear a piece of cloth under their helmets that covers the back of the neck as some protection, but still the sun finds a way. You've seen men with skin peeling in strips from their noses and ears after days of patrol in the Syrian desert sun. The horses suffer too, lathered and foaming if pushed too hard. At least the nights in the desert are cool. In European summers, the humidity can be high, and nights offer little relief. Mosquitoes whining in your ear, sweat trickling down your chest as you try to sleep. Tempers can flare in the heat, but you are forbidden from the luxury of outbursts. The strict discipline holds. A brother might clench his jaw in frustration or mutter a quick prayer to endure instead of shouting. The rule says no brother should give way to wrath or quarrel. If anger arises, he must either remain silent or at most quietly ask pardon later. So you all become adept at bottling emotion or sublimating it into prayer and work. You channel anger into swinging a hammer at the forge or fervently scrubbing floors. And autumn, harvest time on your lands. The Templars own many fields and farms, whose produce funds your missions. At a preceptory, knights might oversee hired laborers or serfs, bringing in wheat, grapes, olives, depending on region. It's a busy time. You might find yourself atop a wagon stacking sheaves of wheat, sweat mingling with chaff that gets everywhere, down your collar, in your boots, or helping tread grapes in a wine press, feet stained purple and the sweet sour smell clinging to you for days. These earthy tasks, though not glorious, at times bring a certain quiet satisfaction. Seeing the granary filled, knowing this means bread for your brothers and perhaps for the poor. Templars are expected to give alms and charity where appropriate. After harvest, an allotment of grain may go to the local poorhouse or the Hospitaller brothers who run hospitals for pilgrims. There's camaraderie in the harvest too. You might actually share a joke with a fellow knight as you toss a sheaf or challenge each other who can scythe more in an hour. Small, innocent bits of humor that relieve the toil. You have to be careful not to laugh too loudly or seem too merry. An overly jocular demeanor could earn a reprimand. But normal human fellowship is hard to suppress entirely. Out in the fields with sun on your face and a cool breeze, sometimes a spontaneous chuckle escapes at a wry comment from a sergeant, and it feels good. Later, at supper, the chaplain might read a stern passage warning against idle chatter, and you cast your eyes down, wondering if your lightheartedness was a sin. The balance between natural joy and the solemnity of your vows is a tricky one. The rule forbids frivolity. You recall it saying that idle words are like daggers to the soul. You try to contain yourself, but you hope God will forgive a little laughter now and then, for He gave us the ability to laugh after all. Still, better safe than sorry. You often end up confessing such moments in the weekly chapter, admitting I laughed out of turn, or I spoke without purpose. Your superior might sigh and assign you a mild penance, perhaps to recite an extra set of psalms, or refrain from wine next feast day. These little mortifications keep you mindful. Let's pause on the topic of food and drink, as it's central to daily life. The Templar diet, per the rule, is disciplined but not extremely ascetic. It's moderate. In practice, you usually eat twice a day, a main meal after sext around noon, and a lighter supper after vespers evening. On fast days or in certain seasons, it might be just one full meal and a bit of bread later. At all times, gluttony is to be avoided. You eat what you need, no more. The typical midday meal. Imagine sitting in the refectory, a long hall with a low ceiling and narrow windows. Brothers sit on benches at long wooden tables, usually all facing one direction. Often the table is against the wall, and they sit only on the outer side, so that no one's back is to the room, which also means no one faces another directly to make eye contact. A common monastic arrangement to discourage conversation and foolery during meals. You and dozens of men are lined up, cowls up or heads bowed, as a prayer is intoned. Benedict Domine nos et tua dona. Bless us, O Lord, and these your gifts. You all cross yourselves and sit. In front of each pair of brothers, there is a shared bowl and maybe a trencher of bread. The rule suggests you eat in pairs, 2 from one bowl, to encourage brotherhood and mutual oversight. Yes, 2 of you share one bowl of whatever stew or pottage is served. This also ensures one doesn't eat more than his share or secretly fast too much to appear holy. Each keeps an eye on the other, gently, and helps each other if needed. Today's fare, let's say, is a thick lentil stew with some onions and a little garlic. It's plain and hearty. There might be a bit of salted fish flaked into it, or some chopped root vegetables. Meat is a rarity. By rule, knights may have meat at most 3 times a week, except Fridays, which are meatless, as are many Wednesdays and Saturdays, plus the entire Lent and other fasting periods where meat is severely restricted. The idea is that too much meat heats the blood and leads to impure thoughts, as well as being a luxury. So usually, you have fish or legumes for protein. Meat days, when they occur, might bring some boiled mutton or bacon into your stew, which is a quiet delight for many, though you dare not show too much excitement. When a roast is served, it is carefully portioned, and the choicest parts given to the sick or the most senior. The rest of you get small pieces, but not today. It's a Friday, perhaps, so just lentils and bread. The bread is black bread, made of barley or rye, maybe mixed grains, dense, dark, a bit sour. Wheat bread, white bread, is a luxury seldom seen unless someone donates it or for a high feast day. The black bread is filling, but can be coarse. Sometimes you find unmilled grain bits that crack in your teeth, or a bit of grit from the millstone. You soak it in the stew to soften it. Eating in silence, you chew slowly. As you do, a reader stands at a pulpit in the corner of the hall, reading aloud from a scripture or a saint's life. This is standard. At every meal, one brother reads something edifying, so that even as your body feeds, your soul too receives nourishment. Today the chosen reading might be from the Gospels, or maybe from Bernard of Clairvaux's writings. The reader's voice is a calm monotone, BT Pauper Spiritu, blessed are the poor in spirit. You listen while guiding a spoon from bowl to mouth in a steady rhythm. The spoon is heavy, made of pewter perhaps, and you feel its cold weight on your tongue each time you sip the broth. Occasionally the reader pauses to turn a page, and in that brief lull, you hear the quiet sounds of the meal, the faint clink of spoon on bowl, someone clearing his throat softly, the sough of wind outside, maybe a cough, but no chatter, no comments about the food or the day, only contemplation and eating. Across from you, the brother sharing your bowl, let's call him Brother Amory, glances up and makes eye contact briefly, which is somewhat against custom. You're supposed to focus on the reading or your food, not make faces at each other. But his eyes just convey a simple message, offering you the last bit of stew in the bowl, as there is just a spoonful left. You nod slightly and gesture that he should take it. He shakes his head ever so slightly and pushes the bowl a hair's breadth toward you. Finally, you split it. You dip the bread crust you have left in the remaining gravy, while he takes the broth with the spoon. This silent negotiation and courtesy is part of the norm. You always try to ensure your brother has enough, and sometimes each ends up insisting the other take the last morsel. The rule explicitly warned against either greed or false piety in eating. It says to eat thankfully what God provides. So you try to maintain balance, not hogging food, but also not making a show of extreme self-denial that could embarrass your dining partner. If one of you ate significantly less than the other on purpose to seem more ascetic, that would silently imply the other ate too much, an unkind thing. The shared bowl arrangement naturally curbs both greed and ostentation. After the main dish, a second course might be served, particularly if it's one of the larger meal days, perhaps some beans or peas, or on better days fruit or cheese. Cheese days are happy days. A nice salty bite of aged cheese from the commandery's dairy makes the dry bread a bit more palatable. Fresh fruit, when in season, is wonderful. A sweet fig or a handful of plums, but often it's more mundane, like beans with herbs. You finish whatever is given. Finally, a cup of watered wine or ale is allowed. The rule permits wine in moderation, the same measure for each brother. Usually 1 cup each is poured. It's weak stuff. If wine, likely diluted with equal or more parts water. If ale, a very small beer, just to quench thirst safely. Drinking water plain can be dangerous if not from a clean source, so often it's safer to have weak ale or wine. You savor a small sip, feeling the slightly sour or bitter notes. You dare not gulp it down greedily. You make it last through the remainder of the reading. At a signal, perhaps the reader closes the book. The meal is done. Grace is said. You all stand and file out. No idle lounging at table, no chatting afterwards about how good or bad the food was. The remains will be taken to the kitchen. If some bread is left, it may be given as alms or saved for tomorrow's pottage. You might then go back to work or to the next prayer service. One thing to note, on certain days there are fasts where one might have only one meal. On those days, by the time that one meal comes in late afternoon, you feel lightheaded and every bite tastes especially delicious. But you admonish yourself not to yearn for it too much. Gluttony can exist even in hunger by obsessing over food. You recall how in the rule, overeating is scorned, and a brother caught sneaking food outside mealtimes could be punished severely. Likewise, refusing to eat what is served out of misguided asceticism or dislike is also frowned on. The ideal Templar attitude to food is to accept it gratefully, neither complaining nor craving. It's easier said than done. Sometimes, outworking all day, your stomach growls fiercely, and the memory of a meat pie from your youth haunts you, or the smell of the kitchen stew can drive you to distraction during prayers before dinner. You train yourself to endure it, perhaps by thinking of Christ's fasting, or the poor who have even less. Punishments have been mentioned a few times. Let's consider them more. The Templar rule outlines penances for various offenses. Minor infractions, like speaking without permission, breaking silence, a lapse in the dress code, a moment of unseemly laughter, are met with small penances, maybe praying extra, eating on the floor as we saw, or temporarily losing certain privileges. For instance, not being allowed to go out riding for pleasure, or being seated at the lowest place in table order. More serious sins, lying, striking a fellow brother in anger, disobedience, can result in being excluded from the common table for a time, meaning you have to eat alone, usually on the ground in the kitchen or infirmary, separated from the brotherhood's fellowship until you've shown repentance. If one commits a grave sin, say fornication, God forbid, but perhaps some knight fell to temptation with a townswoman on leave, or cowardice in battle, or theft of the order's property, that could lead to expulsion entirely. The rule is clear. A Templar hoarding personal gold is to be cast out, for example. They hold you to high standards. You've witnessed some punitive scenes. One memory stands out. A brother was accused of pride and insubordination. He openly questioned an order from the marshal and boasted of his own prowess. This was taken very seriously. The order cannot function if each knight's pride overrides obedience. So in chapter meeting, after he failed to humbly admit his fault, instead he tried to justify his behavior, the council decided a punishment. He was to be whipped and do penance. They stripped him to his waist in front of us. He stood with head bowed, naked from the waist up in the chilly morning air, while two appointed brothers took rods and gave him a fixed number of lashes across the back. Each lash was deliberate, not excessively brutal, but firm. The swish and crack of each stroke made some of us flinch inwardly. The brother did not cry out. He bit his lip and endured, though by the end his back was red and starting to welt. Then he was ordered to prostrate himself at the chapel door, each time we entered for a week, meaning he lay face down, and each of us as we went in had to step past him while he begged silently for our prayers. It was humbling indeed. By the end of the week he was restored to table, and he had become a much quieter, gentler soul. These chastisements, harsh as they seem, are meant to save a man's soul from worse fate. And often, the bond between brothers after a penance is strangely strengthened. We've all been there in some way, maybe not whipped, but kneeling in apology or suffering public shame. It fosters mutual understanding and a resolve not to let each other fall again. Less dramatic punishments happen often. For example, You once forgot to properly lock the sacristy cabinet and left some items in disarray. The commander discovered it and found you lacked due reverence. So he told you at the next chapter that you would eat no meat for a month, not a huge hardship given the limited meat anyway, but it was a sign, and that you must clean the church floor on your knees every day for a week. So after Compline, you were there with a bucket scrubbing the already clean stones, while others filed by. It was embarrassing, but instructive. As you scrubbed, you actually prayed for forgiveness and felt a certain lightness of heart, as if each stroke of your brush also cleansed some of your pride. Imagine the psychological weight of always watching yourself, curbing every natural impulse. You live under constant examination by your superiors, by your peers, and ultimately, you firmly believe, by God and His angels. When you lie in bed at night before sleep, you perform an examination of conscience. Did I speak when I shouldn't? Did I harbor angry thoughts about Brother X? Did I secretly wish for more food? Did an impure image cross my mind? And did I entertain it too long? There are so many ways to stumble, even within cloistered walls. And if any such failings occurred, you resolve to bring them up at the next confession or chapter meeting. This inner scrutiny can be exhausting, but it's your spiritual battle. As much as sword against Saracen, you wage war against your own sinful nature. Pride especially, the chronicler comments about Templars often note their discipline, yet there is always the danger of arrogance. Everyone respects or fears you externally. You are part of a famed order. It is easy to let pride creep in. So you double your prayers for humility. Some nights, kneeling alone in the chapel after others retire, you whisper to Christ that you feel so weak. Maybe you even shed a tear, quickly wiping it away, because showing too much emotion publicly isn't approved, but alone you allow it. You beg forgiveness for not always feeling devout, for sometimes resenting the strictness, for perhaps secretly missing the taste of good wine, or the comfort of a woman's companionship which you never even truly had. You pray, Lord, take these thoughts away, make me worthy. The chapel is silent. Sometimes frustratingly, it feels like God's answer is also silent, but a gentle candle flame might flicker, and you take it as a sign of comfort. You get up, knees numb from the hard floor, and return to bed, hoping grace will strengthen you tomorrow. Now, along with this somber rhythm, there are occasional moments of relative lightness or human warmth. Think of feast days: Easter, Christmas, the Feast of the Assumption, maybe the anniversary of the Order's founding, days when the strict fasting is lifted, when the refectory might be decorated with some greenery or flowers, and the cooks allowed to prepare something a bit special. Perhaps on Easter the local lord sends over some fine white bread and a barrel of better wine as a gift, and maybe a lamb is roasted. On such days, while still composed, the brothers are noticeably cheerier. At the meal, though still in silence, some have contented smiles as they bite into tender meat for once, or nibble a honey cake. Sweets are extremely rare, but on a great feast maybe a bit of honey or fruit tart is served. Afterwards, in the cloister, one might whisper to another, "That was a fine meal, thanks be to God," and the other nods fervently. Even these ascetics appreciate a treat. In the evening of a feast day, the rule permits a bit more wine, so perhaps a second cup is poured. You must be cautious. One extra cup after long abstinence can get you tipsy quickly. The older knights watch to ensure no one overindulges or starts getting too merry. But the mellow warmth of wine loosens some tongues in gentle ways. You might find yourself quietly humming a fragment of a hymn while polishing your belt, feeling almost content for a change. Sometimes traveling dignitaries or officials of the order come, perhaps the Grand Master himself, or a visitor, an inspector. Then the house bustles with preparation, cleaning, airing out guest chambers, laying the best tablecloth, plain white linen, but without patches for the meal, setting out maybe silver cups that are normally stored away. When such a figure arrives, there might be news from the wider world, updates on the Crusades, or on politics. At those times, you become aware that your quiet life is part of a larger structure. For instance, you hear that a crusade is being called by the Pope, or that another city in the Holy Land has fallen or been retaken. Perhaps knights from the east bring first-hand accounts. They speak of the blazing sun of Jerusalem, the cunning of the Saracen armies, of castles besieged, of brave brothers martyred. These stories stir your blood and make you stand a little taller. It reminds you that your purpose is grand. You are part of an international brotherhood defending Christendom. Yet, when those envoys leave, you remain in your small commandery, still doing the mundane chores. Sometimes, you admit, you yearn to be sent to the front, to Outremer, to truly prove yourself in the ultimate battle. Some of your fellows have been and returned with scars and tales, and often sadness at how things are going poorly lately in those wars. But someone must stay to keep the heartlands running, to train, to raise funds, to support the whole enterprise. So you check that ambition and return to hoeing the garden or teaching new novices their letters, trusting that if God wills you to see combat glory, He will arrange it in time. Years go by. Perhaps now imagine yourself not as the young knight you were, but older, maybe in your 40s or 50s, which in these times is a respectable age, especially for a warrior who's lived through dangers and lean times. Your hair, what little is left around your tonsure, is graying. You have a pronounced limp from an old injury. Maybe a horse fell on your leg, or you took a crossbow bolt in the thigh some years back. In the chill mornings, that leg aches fiercely. You grimace as you rise from bed, your joints stiff, yet you keep to the same schedule. If anything, you become more devout as you age. Sensing your mortality, you cling to the routines of prayer with even more earnestness, trying to store up merit, or at least die in grace. Younger brothers now look to you as an example. You've become the quiet veteran who can recite the rule from memory, who catches a novice by the arm gently when he's about to break silence out of ignorance, and just puts a finger to your lips to remind him. You don't need to scold. Your very presence commands respect. There's a kind of gentle authority and seasoned humility. However, you also struggle with the weight of accumulated guilt and doubt. All those years, all the confessions, you sometimes wonder, have I done enough? Am I any closer to God, or have I simply wasted my life in routine without true holiness? There is a medieval concept of acedia, a spiritual torpor or despair that can afflict monks, a kind of dark night of the soul or burnout, where the routine feels meaningless and one is tempted to give up. Perhaps in an unguarded moment, you feel something like that. You've defended the faith, yes, but also seen brethren die or turn apostate under torture. Some knights did renounce Christ when tortured, and that news disturbed you greatly. You've given up family, but did that please God? Or did He want you to show love also to them? Sometimes you wonder, is God pleased with all this silence, this hardship? He remains so silent Himself. At Mass, during the elevation of the host, you peer desperately, hoping for some personal sign of divine presence, a warmth in your heart, a whisper in your soul. But often you feel nothing out of the ordinary. Yet you continue, because faith is not about feelings, as the chaplain says. It's about fidelity. In these times, you cling to the one thing you have absolute faith in, the brotherhood around you and the vows you made. Those are concrete. God's grace is invisible, but the order is visible and real. So you double down on fulfilling the rule, trusting that is your path to salvation. One area that often troubles your conscience, the violence you've either committed or been ready to commit. The Templars are monk knights, a paradox of piety and combat. You recall the enthusiastic sermons of Bernard of Clairvaux, praising the knights who kill without sin, because they kill evil, infidels, and protect the innocent. You've always believed that, yet as the years went on, you saw nuance. Not every enemy was purely evil. Some were just soldiers on the other side, with families with courage of their own. You fought them nonetheless when duty commanded. Perhaps you even killed a man in battle, and afterwards, cleaning the blood off your sword, you felt a strange hollowness. The chaplain assured you it was righteous. You did it for Christ. But deep down, the weight of having taken a life lingers. In nightmares sometimes, you see the face of a Saracen warrior you struck down, his eyes wide with fear or anger, and you jolt awake with that image burning until morning prayers chase it away. This too, you suppress and bury in more prayer. Now let's shift perspective a bit, widen the lens beyond your personal daily life to the bigger picture around you. The order has grown powerful and rich over 2 centuries. Commanderies like yours dot Europe. The Templars own vast estates, mills, vineyards. They also became key players in finance. Kings and nobles deposited treasure with them. Templar houses acted like banks, offering letters of credit to pilgrims so they wouldn't carry cash on dangerous roads. You've perhaps helped tally coin chests or guard vaults in a major preceptory like Paris or London at some point. The world sees the Templars as wealthy bankers and landowners, not just pious knights, and with wealth comes envy. Over the years, you've heard mutterings. Local lords grumble that the Templars don't pay taxes on their lands, being exempt by papal privilege. Merchants sometimes call you all hypocrites, poor knights who own half the county. They sneer behind your back. The clergy occasionally resent that the order answer only to the Pope, not to local bishops. That independence breeds friction. You recall one prior of a monastery complaining that villagers go to the Templars' chapels instead of the parish church, diverting alms. Such tensions are subtle but pervasive. Of course, being in the order, you tell yourself these criticisms are born of misunderstanding or jealousy, but you worry, have some brothers perhaps grown too fond of wealth? You've seen preceptories where the accommodations are a bit too comfortable, or where commanders host lavish feasts for secular guests, ostensibly to maintain good relations, but still, it felt off compared to your austere training. Some younger knights in prosperous regions seem less hardened than you expected. You heard stories of Templars wearing fur-lined cloaks in cold climates, despite the rule forbidding fur trim, or indulging in good wines. Possibly rumors, but you know human nature. Prosperity can soften discipline. You fight that at your house with strict adherence. Nonetheless, the public image of the Templars has shifted from the humble heroes of the Crusades' early days to now a somewhat secretive, very wealthy organization with formidable castles and a network of influence. Kings have borrowed large sums from the Templars to fund wars. The King of France, for one, owes enormous debt. And here, your knowledge intersects with fate. Let's focus on France, year 1307. You might be a Templar preceptor in France by then. If not, imagine you are, because the arrest scenario is usually centered in France. King Philip IV, called Philip the Fair, sits on the throne of France. He's strong-willed, ambitious, and always in need of money for his endless wars with the English and his lavish court. He's also at odds with the Pope recently, having even pressured the papacy into relocating to France. The Templars are among the richest institutions around, and conveniently, they hold their funds largely in their Paris temple treasury. There have been whispers at court. Why do we let this rich order stand independent? They should be subject to the crown, or dissolved and their wealth taken. Of course, none of that is spoken publicly yet. Outwardly, Philip gave friendly overtures. He even considered merging the Templars and Hospitallers at one point under his influence, but he was rebuffed. In the summer and early autumn of 1307, maybe you recall uneasy signs. The Paris preceptory had a routine audit by royal officials, which seemed unusually prying. A former Templar, some man who had been expelled, was seen lurking and telling wild tales to ministers. Disgruntled ex-members often spread slanders, and a strange letter arrived from the king to various officials that you caught wind of, sealed instructions delivered in secrecy to bailiffs and seneschals across France, including the area of your commandery. You didn't know the content, but you had a bad feeling. The church in Rome was also pressuring the order to defend itself against some of these circulating accusations you dismissed as absurd, that Templars worship idols, trample the cross, commit blasphemies and secret rituals, things you never witnessed nor believe happen except maybe in the twisted imagination of malcontents. Your Grand Master Jacques de Molay even went to meet the Pope in late 1306 or 1307 to discuss reform or merger possibilities, and he came back still thinking all was fine. Yet, on a dawn in October 1307, the hammer falls, Friday the 13th of October 1307. That date will forever be infamous, though you don't yet know it. You awaken in your dormitory as usual for matins, only to find the preceptory surrounded. It happens almost silently at first, the crunch of many hooves on the road, then dark shapes moving at the gate. Suddenly, a loud banging on the outer door. The sergeant on night watch barely has time to cry out an alarm before armed men flood in. They are the king's men, royal sergeants and men-at-arms, with a local bailiff holding a parchment warrant. Chaos and confusion. You and the brothers, half asleep and unarmed, are taken completely by surprise. Who would dare attack the order on its own property in Christendom? Some initially think maybe robbers, but no, too organized and carrying the royal banner. The commander, still pulling on his tunic, rushes out to confront them. You see torches in the pre-dawn gloom, gleaming off steel halberds. One of the king's officers steps forward and loudly declares that by order of King Philip, and with authority of the Pope, they claim, all members of the Knights Templar are to be arrested on charges of heresy and other crimes. You feel like the ground drops from under you. Heresy? Charges? What devilry is this? A couple of brothers draw swords out of instinct, but the commander barks. No resistance. Remember your vows of obedience. Outnumbered and taken unawares, you could not hope to win by fighting. It would only confirm suspicion that you're lawless, and you're sworn to obey rightful authority. The king is technically your secular lord, even if the order answers only to the Pope spiritually. So gritting your teeth, you submit. They disarm everyone. It's humiliating. Burly soldiers strip you of your dagger, your sword still by your bunk, your hands pulled behind your back. Some weep openly in shock. Others shout protests of innocence or outrage. This is an outrage. We are loyal servants of God. You yourself perhaps maintain a stunned silence, inwardly praying, Lord, help us. What is this trial? The royal men search the premises thoroughly. Some already have detailed lists of items and people. It seems they knew exactly how many knights and sergeants reside here, and roughly what valuables you have. They seize records, chests of funds, the archive. They seize the sacristy, taking chalices, reliquaries, no doubt to be claimed as either evidence or just loot. Everything is inventoried briskly. You notice some of these lay officials smirking, as though pleased to cut the mighty Templars down this way. You and your brothers are bound with ropes or shackles and led out. Outside, villagers and townsfolk have gathered, awakened by the commotion. Some gasp or cry, seeing their once proud protectors now prisoners. You catch snippets of the sergeants reading out accusations to anyone listening that the Templars have been found guilty of terrible heresies, spitting on the Holy Cross, worshipping idols, sodomy, and other abominations. The crowd murmurs, confused. Some refuse to believe it. Others cross themselves in horror, as if the mere mention of such blasphemies in relation to you is frightening. One older woman, a baker who used to give you leftover bread for the poor, actually steps forward and calls out to you by name. Brother, what are they saying? I know you wouldn't blaspheme. Tell them it's not true. But you are not allowed to respond. A guard yanks your rope and pushes you along. You manage to shake your head at her, as if to say, it's false, before you're pulled away. In your heart, a mix of anger and sorrow wells up. Anger at the slander, sorrow that people who once trusted you now hear these lies. The next weeks or months blur into a nightmare of incarceration. You and your brothers from that commandery are taken to a castle or fortress that's been turned into a makeshift prison for Templars. There, dozens of brothers from other houses are also herded in. You see familiar faces from nearby preceptories, as well as some brought from afar. All have the same bewildered, haggard look. They separate the knights and sergeants into individual cells or small groups. You find yourself in a cold dungeon cell, dark and damp. The door is heavy oak with a small barred window. They remove your mantle and give you cheap rough cloth to wear. The straw on the floor is old and moldy. The smell of urine and rot is thick. Days pass with no word initially. You pray in the darkness, clinging to faith that the Pope or someone will intervene. Surely a misunderstanding. Some jailers come, offering odd leniency to those who confess quickly. You don't even know what to confess. You've done nothing heretical. They say, just admit what you did, and we can make this easier. It dawns on you that this is a carefully orchestrated plot. They want confessions, true or false, to justify this action. Your conscience rebels. To lie about blaspheming Christ? Never. You'd rather die. Many of you feel the same, at least at first. Then the interrogations begin. One by one, brothers are taken from cells to chambers, where royal inquisitors, with a few church clerics co-opted, though under the king's sway, question them. At first it's formal questioning. Do you deny Christ in your initiation? Do you spit on the crucifix? Do you engage in indecent kissing? Do you worship an idol? A head with a beard? Bizarre questions that shock you to hear. You vehemently deny each, your voice firm. I have never, nor have my brothers ever done such things. We are faithful Christians. They write something down, frowning. They ask again, in different order, trying to trip you up or get any hint of hesitation. You give none. After a while, their tone grows harsher. They accuse, brother so-and-so already confessed these acts. Why won't you? You blink. Is it true? Did someone confess? It could be a trick. Or perhaps some weaker brother, under duress, lied. You recall rumors that a few confessed in Paris to similar charges to avoid torture. It rattles you, but you maintain innocence. Then they bring out the instruments. These interrogators are not gentle monks. They are hardened by the king's determination to extort confessions. They show you ropes, pulleys, weights, even fire. Your heart pounds, but you silently pray for strength. They demand again, confess that you spat on the cross at your induction, and that the master told you it was only a piece of wood, that you swore unlawful oaths, committed indecencies. You shout no, never, and with that, 2 gaolers seize you. They tie your wrists behind your back with rope. They hoist the rope over a beam. You realize with dread, this is the strappado, an infamous torture where you'll be hung by your arms behind your back, dislocating shoulders. Last chance, confess the truth of these charges, they bark. You manage a whisper. I cannot confess what is false. It is a sin. They yank the rope. Agony. Your shoulders feel as if they're being torn from their sockets. You try not to scream, but a groan escapes, then a cry. The pain intensifies as they jerk you higher, your feet leaving the ground, all your weight now pulling on your wrenched arms. Tears flood your eyes involuntarily. You gasp prayers, half insensate. In that haze, you hear them asking again, "Did you deny Christ at your secret ceremony? Say yes, or we'll pull harder." Your vision sparks with black spots. Perhaps you faint briefly, only to be revived by cold water dashed on your face. The pain is relentless, unnatural. Joints never meant to bear weight in that direction. Finally, something in your left shoulder gives with a sickening pop. A bolt of white-hot pain sears through you, and you scream hoarsely. They lower you slightly to relieve, and then ask, "Ready to tell the truth now?" At this moment, many break. Perhaps you do too. Not because you believe the charges, you know they're false, but because you feel death or permanent maiming is imminent. And maybe you think, if I say something, maybe I can later recant or seek absolution. God forgive me, I must stop this. Or maybe you hold out longer than most, resolved to be a true martyr of integrity. But you hear down the hall the screams of other brothers being tortured as well. One crying out, "Enough, I'll say it. I'll say whatever you want." And that haunts you. You wonder if strength to resist is actually prideful stubbornness or true righteousness. It's so confusing in the swirl of pain and fear. Let's say you try to hold out. They then apply another torture. Perhaps they bring out a brazier of hot coals and threaten to burn the soles of your feet. Or they tighten a tourniquet around your leg until flesh bulges. Each prisoner's experience may vary, but the pattern is the same: relentless, methodical breaking of the body to crush the spirit. At some point, something snaps within you. When they next demand you agree that yes, I spat on the cross at initiation, a faint voice, your own, unrecognizable, croaks, "Yes, I did." Immediately they ask more. "Did you worship an idol?" Your heart says no, but your tongue, desperate to appease, says softly, "If you say so, yes." The inquisitor leans in. "Describe it then." Panic. You don't know any idol, but they seem to expect a head with a long beard or a cat, from hints they gave. So maybe you mumble, "A head with a beard. We were told it had power. You just want the torture to end. You'll say anything." They press on. "Did you engage in immoral kisses with your brothers, as charged?" You flush with shame and shaking, say yes once, though it never happened, because you sense that's what they want. At last, they stop the torture. They bring you down from the rope, your arms useless and throbbing. They actually pat your shoulder, the dislocated one, causing you to wince, and say, "Good, good. See, now you're being honest. Sign here." They thrust a parchment or ledger in front of you with a quill. Your vision swims, but you scratch something like your name, tears splashing on the page. They might even dictate, "I, brother so-and-so, confess that at my reception I denied Christ and spat upon the cross, and that I was told to commit indecent acts, etc." You, barely conscious, just nod or sign as required. The door opens and you're dragged back to your cell. On the way, you pass by another brother being carried. He appears lifeless, maybe died under torture or passed out. A guard mutters, "This one refused to speak, fool." They toss him on the floor in a cell like a sack of grain. You think it's Brother Bernard. You recognize his bloodied face. He's deathly still. You wonder if he's breathing. In the darkness of your cell, after they leave, you curl on the straw and sob quietly. From pain, from remorse. You have just borne false witness against yourself and the order. In your delirium, you worry, "Have I damned my soul by lying about renouncing Christ? Will Christ forgive that I, even under duress, said such blasphemy?" They forced you, yes, but you know theology enough to fear eternal consequences. You pray feverishly for forgiveness and for deliverance. Over the next days, news trickles among cells, whispered when a guard isn't listening. Most brothers have confessed under torture. A few died without yielding. A few perhaps really believe the end of the order is nigh and might as well say whatever to survive. You hear one or two went mad, babbling nonsense. They are keeping you all in isolation largely. Occasionally they bring a priest to admonish you to hold to your confession for the sake of your soul. Ironically, claiming that to recant now would be lying to God. It's twisted beyond measure. In weeks or months to come, you might be brought before a panel of cardinals or papal legates, since Pope Clement is now involved, somewhat unwillingly, but pressured by Philip. These churchmen ask if your confession was true. Some brothers at that point recant, boldly stating, "No, it was forced, we are innocent." You consider doing the same. Your conscience screams to do it, but then you recall the horror of torture. Will they send you back for more if you recant? Possibly. Indeed, in some cases that happened. Those who recanted in 1308 were declared relapsed heretics and burnt alive by the French authorities. Word of that reaches you eventually. 54 Templars burned at the stake near Paris for recanting their earlier forced confessions. That strikes terror in you. When they ask you, you are torn. Truth and martyrdom, or cling to life by holding to the false confession. Perhaps you lack the strength now for martyrdom. You feel you already failed at it by giving in under torture, or perhaps guilt steals you to declare innocence, now come what may. History had both types among the Templars. Let's say, in your fatigue and fear, you weakly affirm, "I maintain what I confessed." The cardinals nod somberly. You hate yourself for it, but you live another day. They keep you imprisoned, but torture ceases largely as the church takes over proceedings. Conditions improve slightly, maybe better food, but still a prisoner. Eventually, the order is officially dissolved by papal decree in 1312. 5 years you've been in limbo, imprisoned throughout. Many brothers died in those years from sickness or despair. You somehow survived, your spirit almost numb. In 1312 they announce, the Templars as an order no longer exist. The property is mostly transferred to the Hospitallers, though kings like Philip seized a good portion. The brothers are to be distributed, some turned over to other religious houses to live out their days in penance, others freed, but under commands to join a monastery or live as hermits, etc. You, perhaps because you confessed and were not a high-profile leader, are assigned to a monastery, maybe a Cistercian abbey, to live quietly. They don't let you return to the world as a knight. They tuck you away where you can't rally any support. At the abbey, the monks treat you with a mix of pity and caution. You are, after all, branded unjustly as a confessed heretic. The church ultimately absolved those who confessed, acknowledging many did so under torture, but suspicion lingers. You spend your remaining years in that monastery's guest house, under watch. Maybe you even must wear a special penitent's cross on your clothing. Some days, as you help the monks in their garden or library, a visitor will whisper, "See that old man? He was a Templar." The visitor might look at you with wide eyes, as if expecting a devil, or with curiosity. As you keep your head down, enduring the quiet stigma, you have become a ghost, a relic of a disbanded brotherhood that many now regard with fear or scorn. Meanwhile, the world moves on. The war in the Holy Land is lost. Acre fell in 1291, and no major crusade regained it. The Hospitallers carry on their work in Rhodes. The lands that were once Templar farms and preceptories are now under new management, kings or rival orders. Some villages still refer to the Temple's Field or the Temple Farm as memory of your order's presence, but soon even that fades or is shrouded in local legend. Maybe peasants, finding an abandoned commandery, break in and find your old chapel dusty, the altar stripped. They pilfer a rusty sword left behind, or a once white mantle left hanging moth-eaten on a peg. They whisper rumors that the Templars had buried gold under the flagstones. Many treasure hunters dig around, usually finding nothing, or maybe a stash of documents or a grave. A few of your brethren manage to escape arrest entirely. In places like Germany or Spain, some simply melded into other orders or secular life quietly. You occasionally hear news that some ex-Templars joined the Hospitallers in Spain to keep fighting Muslims in the Reconquista under a new banner, but same spirit. Others, less fortunate, are begging on the streets because all they knew was soldiering and monastic life, and now disowned, they have nothing. You consider yourself somewhat fortunate to at least have a roof over your head and bread to eat here, even if as a broken penitent. In 1314, word arrives at the monastery. The last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, who had also confessed under torture but then recanted publicly, was burned at the stake in Paris. They say he maintained the order's innocence till the end, and according to rumor, invoked divine justice on the Pope and King, who unjustly condemned them, and eerily both Pope Clement V and King Philip IV died within the year of Molay's execution, fueling later legends that Jacques cursed them. When you hear this, you silently cross yourself and pray for the soul of Molay and all brothers martyred. Perhaps you allow a tiny smile of vindication at the thought that higher powers might have answered Molay's final call. But it's a grim satisfaction. Nothing can undo the tragedy that befell your order and yourself. As an old man, you find yourself the sole keeper of certain memories. Many documents of the Templars were burned or lost. The true daily life you led, the prayers, the hardships, the genuine piety mingled with human struggle. Who will ever know it now? The public will remember the sensational charges, the lurid tales confessions painted, black magic, idols, secret rites. Those make good gossip and, in time, songs and stories. You've heard a traveling minstrel once at the Abbey's guest hall, singing an embellished story of wicked Templars who worshipped a devil's head and had vast hidden treasure. The guests loved it, reveling in the scandalous mystery. You sat in the corner unseen, heart heavy, knowing it to be nonsense. But you said nothing. Who would listen to you, a disgraced old Templar, if you protested? Perhaps they might even think you lie to cover your order's sins. So you keep quiet. Over the years, myth overtakes fact. Sometimes a sympathetic monk sits with you and asks, "Brother, what really happened? Were any of those charges true?" With tears in your eyes, you tell him, "No, my friend, we were loyal Christians. We never betrayed the cross. We lived simply, prayed, fought when needed. We had our faults. Perhaps we grew too proud or rich for others' liking, but heretics we were not." The monk nods, patting your hand. He believes you perhaps, but he's just one person. Officially, the church didn't pronounce you all guilty. Clement V actually avoided saying you were guilty. He dissolved the order for the good of the church politically. Yet the stain remains, and with the Templars gone, no one is left to systematically clear your name. Time passes. You die quietly, perhaps around 1330, in that monastery. They bury you in a small, unmarked grave in the Abbey's cemetery, simply as brother name. A former knight of the temple, maybe a kindly abbot ensures your grave is cared for a while, but eventually, as decades and centuries roll on, even that site might be forgotten or lost in renovations. Your life, all the fervor of youth, the disciplined routine, the nights of prayer, the camaraderie with your brothers, the pain endured for faith, it all fades into silence. The world only remembers a caricature, either the valiant crusading Templars of the earlier times, or the cursed heretical Templars of the trial. The truth of your daily existence, The quiet suffering and devotion is like a faint incense smoke that dissipated long ago, leaving barely a trace. Imagine now, long after, someone wandering the ruins of a Templar preceptory in rural France or England. It's the 15th or 16th century, say. The place is deserted, except for wild grasses. The chapel's roof has fallen in, ivy crawling up the crumbling walls. A farmer uses part of the old dormitory as a barn for sheep. In the broken arch of a window sits an owl, hooting at dusk. Under a pile of stones, a curious traveler finds a tattered parchment. It's damp and mostly illegible, but perhaps a few lines can be read, something like an inventory. 3 mantles for winter, 2 books of hours, 14 arrows, 1 calice d'argent, silver chalice. A mundane list, not a treasure map. The traveler tosses it aside, not interested. He's looking for rumored gold. He doesn't realize he held a fragment of real daily history in his hands. A gust of wind scatters the fragile parchment into the weeds, and so the real stories lie buried. The graves of your comrades are unmarked. Some were reinterred in common cemeteries after the trials, without their Templar cross headstones. A few skeletons found centuries later. Archaeologists identify them possibly as Templars by their burial context, perhaps arms crossed or signs of a monastic burial, but nothing certain. The records that survive, some trial transcripts, the rule, some letters, tell us factual details, but they don't carry the feeling of what it was like to live that life. Only in quiet moments, perhaps reading the rule of the temple, can one sense the echo of your voices, admonitions against laughter, notes about how to wear your hair, allowances for the sick. Those speak to human lives once governed by these words. Now, as the world remembers the Templars, it is often in romanticized or lurid tales. People speak of the Holy Grail, or secret treasure, or hidden knowledge of the temple. None of that was part of your actual day-to-day existence. You chuckle softly, if only spirits could, at how far-fetched it all is. If only they knew that the treasure of the Templars was not a golden chalice or the Ark of the Covenant, but rather simpler things. A well-maintained stable of horses, a store of grain to feed pilgrims, a network of preceptories that could lend money responsibly, and the collective devotion of thousands of men who gave up normal life to serve. The real secrets of the Templars were the countless small acts of discipline and faith, rising at midnight to pray for the world, binding each other's wounds, resisting temptations of flesh and pride, and maintaining brotherhood under extreme rules. But those secrets die in the heart, not flashy enough for legend. Imagine one of the last tangible remnants, a Templar banner, the beauseant, half black, half white, with the red cross, found stored in a church attic decades after the dissolution. Faded, moth-eaten, it once led knights into battle, fluttering above their heads. Now it's just cloth. A curious priest might cut a small piece to keep as a curiosity, and the rest is discarded as useless. Or perhaps a preserved seal of the order, 2 knights on 1 horse, found in archives. It may join a collection in a museum, labeled as an artifact of a bygone group. People look at it behind glass and try to imagine what those nights were like, but they cannot smell the sweat, feel the cold, hear the prayers. They only see the symbol and conjure their own narratives, often far from reality. So at the end of it all, what remains? Silence and stillness. The clamor of battle, the chants in chapels, the hoofbeats on dirt roads, the ringing of blacksmiths' hammers, all those sounds have ceased. What's left are stones and paper and maybe a whisper in collective memory. The loud accusations and trials themselves have become dusty history, eclipsed by larger events over time. The Church quietly recognizes later that many Templars likely were innocent, but it's a footnote, Philip's line benefits from seized wealth, but he's gone and his kingdom faces new issues. For you in the beyond, we hope in the peace of God's embrace, there is finally rest from the arduous journey. The loneliness, the guilt, the physical pain, gone. Perhaps now you see clearly the meaning of your life, not in earthly vindication or glory, but in having persisted in faith despite it all. Maybe God's silence was not absence, but a quiet accompaniment. He was there in the candlelight on those long nights, in the strength that kept you from utter despair in prison, in the brotherhood love you shared. As we, the living, imagine walking through these ruins and recalling your story, we can almost sense your presence. Close your eyes once more and picture standing in the middle of a ruined Templar chapel at twilight. The stone altar is broken, but here and there on the floor you see the indentations where knees once knelt day after day. Touch the cold stone. Feel how it's worn smooth in spots by many hands and feet. Over there, against the wall, an outline where the stairs led up to the dormitory, now leading nowhere. A faint scent of moss and dust is in the air. Swallows have nested in the crannies of the old walls, chirping as they settle for the night. In this quiet place you might almost hear echoes, the faint chant of a psalm from long ago, or the clink of a spur on the floor. It's as if time hasn't fully erased the memory. It lingers like a subtle perfume, but it is very faint, almost nothing. If you concentrate, you feel an immense sorrow and serenity intertwined. Sorrow for how hard and unappreciated that life was, how these nights struggled internally and externally only to be extinguished unjustly. Serenity, because despite all, there is a sense of dedication fulfilled. They gave all on the altar of duty and faith. However history judged them, perhaps God saw the truth in each heart. And so, why it quietly sucked to be a medieval Templar knight. Not in the sensational way people think. No, not secret devil worship or cursed immortality, but in the simple human way. It was a life of constant self-denial, hardship, fear of sin, physical exhaustion, sparse comfort, and ultimately betrayal by the very society they strove to protect. It was dust and duty. It was hope and heartbreak in equal measure. Yet, as we finish this long, soft journey through their world, we also recognize the dignity in that suffering. In each chord done in silence, each prayer whispered on aching knees, each mile ridden in the cold, there was a devotion that deserves remembering. Not for romance or legend, but for what it was, men trying, in the only way they knew, to serve God and others, and often feeling abandoned or misunderstood in return. Now the candle of memory grows dim, the hour is late, our voices soften to a hush as we take our leave of the ruined chapel and the ghosts within. Imagine gently placing a lantern on the ground by the altar, as if symbolically returning a light to where they prayed. The flame flickers, casting long shadows that dance among the stones, almost like figures in white mantles moving once more. A breeze comes through the open doorway. The night air is cool, carrying the scent of dew and distant pines. Under the stars, the old temple grounds lie in solemn repose. We step outside slowly. Crickets chirp in the grass. The sky is a deep indigo, the stars steady in their eternal vigil. That same sky, those same stars looked down on the Templars centuries ago as they kept their overnight watches or rode on moonlit patrols. The world continues, silent about their toil, yet in this moment we remember them. Take a deep breath of the night air, feel the weight of their story settle into silence. The hardships, the vows, the cold and hunger, the faith and the doubt, the tragic end, it all gradually dissolves into the still night. Only a hush remains, a quiet understanding. It's time to close your eyes and let these images fade. The lonely knight on guard atop a castle wall at midnight, the clink of his armor as he shifts to ease sore feet, whispering a prayer to stave off weariness. The line of hooded figures in a chapel at dawn, breath visible in the cold as they chant psalms. The clatter of wooden bowls in a bare dining hall, and the faint voice reading scripture. The jingle of harness and the crunch of snow as a column of riders snakes through an alpine pass, each man lost in his own thoughts under the strict silence. The dim glow of a single candle as an aging warrior monk sits alone, bandaging his arthritic knee and murmuring the rosary. The echo of that unjust knock on the door in 1307, the quiet weeping in a prison cell, the final empty halls and abandoned graves, where only the wind reads the names that once were. All these moments drift like fallen leaves in an old cloister garth, swirling gently, then coming to rest. All is quiet now. The tale has been told, softly, truthfully, without glamour, without exaggeration, just a tapestry of real lives long gone. In this deep silence, perhaps you feel a sense of peace for them and for yourself. They have laid down their burdens. You can lay down yours for the night. The past is at rest, and so should we be. Thank you for coming on this slow, mournful journey with me. If you find comfort in these quiet travels through history's shadows, remember to like the video and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps more than you know to keep these gentle stories coming. And I always love to read in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is as you share these moments with us. It's amazing to see how far and wide our little candlelight travels go. Now, dear friend, rest your eyes, rest your mind. Imagine that candle in the ruined chapel slowly burning out, its flame getting lower and lower. The stones grow darker, the shadows meld into the night. In the distance, a lone nightingale sings a few last notes and then falls silent. The world is at peace in this hour. You are safe, you are warm, and you carry within you the remembrance of those nights, their struggles and perseverance. Let that gentle pride and compassion soothe you. As you drift off to sleep, know that across time and space, we are all connected in these quiet stories, all fellow travelers seeking understanding and solace. Good night, and God bless.